Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of the Ampersand View, a series of interviews with the members of our research think tank Ampersand. This time organized alongside the ICE 365 content series on RegTech and payments. Our guest today is Mr. Alan Feldman, a widely recognized industry expert, previously and for quite a long time and in a variety of roles with the large casino group MGM, and now a distinguished fellow at the International Center for Gaming Regulation at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas. Thank you, Alan, for joining us today, and great to have you. I've asked you to join us for this installment of the Ampersand View to talk specifically about cashless payments with a focus on the US. Perhaps it isn't a very new topic in the industry, but really a trend whose development has been accelerated by the pandemic. So really in that context, then jumping into my first question, what is driving the adoption of cashless now in the US?
Well, Eva, thank you for inviting me on. What's driving the adoption of cashless, you're exactly right. The notion of cashless technology has been around for a very, very long time. And most regulatory agencies would not allow it in fear that it might exacerbate problem gambling behavior among consumers. And so over the last decade or more, really closer to 2 decades, it's sort of been held in abeyance over this concern about how it would affect consumer behavior. Then came March of 2020, and a great fear about public health and public safety over cash handling. And what had happened was so many companies had gone ahead and developed the technology. They were ready to go. In fact, there was a wonderful story recently in the Nevada Independent that described the fact that at G2E in 2019, almost every single manufacturer had in the back room off the stage, off the show floor, a display of all of their cashless technology, all of their digital wallets. It was all ready to go. They just weren't showing it because regulators weren't ready to adopt it. And then came COVID. And it seemed as if almost overnight, and by overnight in the regulatory world, I mean 90 days, there were almost a dozen states that had approved cashless technology use because the fear of public health and safety was greater than whatever it may have meant in terms of consumer behavior and any sort of safety as it pertained to gambling and consumers. And now that's all well and good. And by the way, I don't disagree. That concern, if any of us can remember back to those days in mid to late March and April and May in 2020, that was very, very frightening. And we all knew that cash had long ago served its usefulness. I think one industry executive had said, hooray for the casino industry. We're still transacting business the way they do in flea markets. So it was clearly long past time that the industry adopted more modern payment systems. Consumers wanted it, the industry wanted it. The time had long come for this. But the question still remains, how does it affect consumers? Does it affect consumers? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Does it matter? No one really knows.
So kind of a silver lining of the pandemic for the casino industry. Could you perhaps dig a little bit deeper into those advantages and disadvantages of cashless payments, but from the casino perspective?
Well, from the casino perspective, the advantages are very clear. Cash costs money. Handling it costs money. You've got to count it. You've got to sort it. You've got to account for it. You've then got to take it to a bank or get it to a bank, process it. It's just a time-consuming, kind of a drag on operations. So to be rid of cash would be a really good thing. To be able to transact in all of those transactions electronically makes systems far more efficient. It's also better for the consumer. The consumer doesn't have to carry cash with them, and especially in a casino environment where those transactions can be much faster and more efficient, and as the industry likes to say, frictionless. That's better for the consumer too. It's also better for the casino. So everyone benefits from it, and all you need to do is be familiar with Starbucks and going into a Starbucks and using your Starbucks account. All you do is have them scan your phone or your watch, or even if you're using the card, just swipe the card and off you go. It's so much easier. And no one has to worry about, did you bring cash? Did it fall out of your pocket? Did it fall on the seat, on the floor of your car? All of that is so much easier. And then the accounting for it is virtually automatic, and everything is handled in a far more efficient way. So the benefits for the casino are very, very clear. There's also the question of data capture. You're capturing a ton of data about the customer, about the customer's behavior, about the transactions that the customer is engaging in. So there's also a huge swath of information that you're able to capture. Again, all very positive benefits to the casino. On the other side, the casino has a ton of data. And now the casino is no longer in a position of being able to say, well, we really don't know what the customer is doing because they're bringing cash in, and we really can't track that because it's a customer with cash and we have no idea who they are. They're coming in with cash and we're not really able to track who they are and what they're doing with it. Now you know. So there is, it would seem, a higher level of responsibility on the part of the casino to know what's going on with every customer. What they do with that and how that's going to work remains to be seen. And what that means, and does that actually affect anything? Is there an impact on duty of care, either literally or perceived, remains to be seen. And that's one of those issues that I think we need to pay a lot of attention to.
So it seems mainly really advantages of cashless payments. Regulators are now on board as well. And looking forward, what do you think is the main challenge then that needs to be addressed to further the adoption of cashless gaming, cashless payments?
I think the big issue here is whether or not there is, in fact, any downside to the consumer. Is the consumer in any way harmed by this? Or is there the potential for harm? And if so, who? Is it 1% of consumers, 3% of consumers? Is there a greater chance of harm? And is there any way for the casino or the financial institutions involved in this, is there any way for them to be able to track that? And that's really critical. We may find out, by the way, that not only is there no difference in terms of player response and harm, but there's also no way to tell. And that's fine. If that's the case, that's fine. But we also may be able to say, you know what, there is a way to tell, and here's what to look for. And that may change some policy. It's not going to say there should be cashless or there shouldn't be. It's here to stay. That's not going to change. But the question is, are there some safeguards that ought to be put in place? Are there some practices that we ought to be considering in order to enhance consumer safety? And that's really, this is a subtle kind of exercise. I would not want anyone thinking that any of the things that we're suggesting at UNLV or anywhere really in the academic world, that anyone is suggesting, oh, cashless is really dangerous. We really ought not do it. Far from it. I think almost anyone in the academic world is looking at this saying, wow, this is terrific. Technology is great. Technology brings a lot of advantages. The only question here is, are there some subtle things going on that we should be paying attention to just to make certain that we're not causing any harm?
So I suppose still a lot of research to be done, as obviously the adoption by the casinos of cashless gaming is rolled out. And that's actually a perfect segue to my next and last question to you. In the context of Ampersand and kind of industry cooperation, which is the spirit of the Ampersand Group, what do you think the industry, through initiatives like Ampersand or other initiatives like the ones at UNLV, can do to help with progress in that area?
I would say that the number one issue, and it's the thing that I love about Ampersand, the number one issue is that the research on topics like this cannot be detached from the casino floor. It cannot be detached from the internet gambling experience. You can't understand what's really going on out there if you force academics to do their work in a lab or in a setting somewhere, on a campus with students. This stuff doesn't work when you try to recreate it in an academic environment. You've got to be actually out there watching what happens with customers. That doesn't mean you need to identify customers. It doesn't mean you need to get into people's lives. All of that can be anonymized and just viewed in an anonymous environment. But you've got to actually see how real people are using these things in real world situations. And as someone who has spent 30 years in the industry, I can tell you, having read through so much of the academic literature, researching or so-called researching gambling, far too much of it has happened away from casinos, away from online spaces, using students, using labs. It makes no sense because it isn't actually examining real world environments. That's part of the reason that I love Ampersand. I've invested my own time in Ampersand, both as someone in the industry and now someone working in academia. We've got to work together. We've got to collaborate, find ways to get these things to cooperate together. And then we're going to end up with some real world information that will inform how we can work together in the future, ultimately to the benefit of consumers and to the benefit of industry. And there's no reason why we can't benefit both.
Thank you so much, Alan. I think this is just a perfect way to conclude our interview. And I also personally would like to thank you so much for your participation in Ampersand for the last year, but beyond, both in a live environment and virtually, which is pretty much how we have been talking to over the last year or so. And, just really looking at the interviews that I have done with other Ampersand members, I can really see a clear trend and a need for that evidence, right? And for evidence-based decisions and that further cooperation between the research institutions and the industry. And I do hope that Ampersand will be able to help with that and play a role with that in that as well. Thank you so much for today.
My pleasure. Thank you.